Okay. Matt, you're in okay?
Yeah, I am. Thank you. And thank you for sending the link, Gunnar. I appreciate it. Sorry I can't be there in person today.
Understood. So no problem. Thanks for joining. All right, I will call the February Des Moines area MPO executive meeting to order and ask for a motion and a second for the agenda. To approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Abstentions. Motion carries. Item 3, vote on the approval of the minutes from the January meeting. To approval. Second. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 4 is consent vote on the finance. Ted, you wanna-
Yeah, the finance subcommittee met on Monday, reviewed the January financial statement. There were no issues, no concerns, and it was passed unanimously with no concerns.
Okay. Good for. There's a second.
Second.
Motion is second, but yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Item 4 is a report and vote on the election of calendar year 24 officers. Ted?
Yeah, so Dean O'Connor, Rick Randleman, and myself met, talked about a number of different candidates. We had plenty of good candidates to choose from. You can see the slate that we're recommending. We think it's a good balance of both experience on exec as well as some new perspectives, as well as balancing kind of big communities with small communities and some gender balance as well. So we felt like this was a very good slate of candidates.
All right, thanks. Ted, any questions for Ted on this? You can call me small.
I'm a gender balance. We all want to come up with something.
Then you move that? Motion by Doug, second by Ted.
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions, motion carries. Mayor Holm, I'll pass the gavel to you. You get it next month, so. Thanks to all three of you for taking the rules on the yard. Again, we'll still have, also be on executive committee, but be good to have Mark and new perspective in the chair position. So thanks for your roles in doing that. And just speaking of that, well, we can probably talk about the dates. Yeah. So, all right, that is the last vote we have to take. So item 6, a report on the fiscal year 28 SDBG grant application. Zach?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to provide you with a quick update on the applications that we received for the federal fiscal year 2028 round of SDBG funding. Those applications are listed on the screen before you there. We received a total of 16 applications for SDBG funding. The total request is a little over 28.6 million. We don't know our exact target yet, but we're expecting it to be somewhere around 16 million. So it'll be another tough year for the funding subcommittee, trying to allocate our $60 million to a higher request like that. As far as next steps go, on the next slide, staff is preparing applications for public comment. We're planning on probably getting that out sometime next week. We'll probably leave it up for about 3 to 4 weeks to collect public comment on the projects. The presentations before the funding subcommittee have been scheduled for March 20th. Those will happen from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock p.m. The past couple of years, we've done those virtually. We are going back to an in-person meeting for those presentations, and those will be there at the MPO office. Following that, the funding subcommittee will meet a week or so after those presentations to develop the recommendation, and then staff will present those recommendations to the committees at their April meetings. Happy to take any questions if you have them. Just wanted to make you aware of the applications that have been submitted.
All right, thank you, Zach. Any questions for Zach? Item 7 is a report of the fiscal year 28 SGB TAP applications. Carl?
you. So, similar fashion to STBG funding, CAP applications, have also coming on the same timeline. We received 10 applications this year, which is about double the previous funding round a couple of years ago. Total funding request of 5.36 million, and that is a little over double what we have available from 2.6 million available this year. So another tough task for the selection committee. So we'll be holding presentations in person along with the STBG applications as well on March 20th with recommendations coming in April. And we'll bring that back to you in April. Happy to take any questions you have.
All right, thanks, Carl. Questions for Carl?
Just need more money.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, all right, thanks, Carl. Thank you. All right, item 8 is a report on the fiscal year 25 unified planning work program and budget. Dylan?
Thank you. As we've discussed in the last, really every year we do this and discussed this last month a little bit, that we're working through the development of the work program and budget for the next fiscal year. We run on a state fiscal year budget, so this would take effect July 1st. While we're working on the work program and budget, we've been focusing more on the work program side of it with the tech committee and understanding what projects, priorities, research, that sort of stuff they want to see in there. What we want to talk today with you about is the budget side of things. And we talked to the finance subcommittee earlier this week as well to walk through the draft budget. Just process moving forward before I forget, we'll come back next month to have a review of the whole package of the work program and the budget. That'll go to the Iowa DOT by the end of March. They'll review everything, give us comments, questions, that sort of stuff. We'll address it. We'll come back in May to this committee and the policy committee for final approval before that's submitted on as final to take effect July 1st. So again, today we'll just walk through the draft budget. Like I said, we talked to the finance subcommittee about this earlier today. There was a link in your packet that went to the full document. We've got some tables up here on the next couple of slides, and I'll walk through this and explain some of the things that are going on. I apologize if that's a little small because it is for me, but I'll do my best here. In terms of revenue, the two main sources of revenue that we have are the DOT funds that we receive from US DOT, as well as the other local funding that matches those DOT funds. In terms of the DOT funds that we receive, you'll see there's several different categories. There's FHWA PL new, FHWA PL set aside, and so forth. Those are just the different buckets that all the federal funds come from. Also included within that, there's US DOT Safe Streets for All, $800,000. This is the grant that we received. We are starting to draw down those funds so that between now and the final in May, we'll adjust that number to reflect where we're approximately at right now. We just started drawing down funds, so we kept it full 800,000 we would have in there. And then for non-local funding, or I'm sorry, for the other local funding, non-federal funding, local assessments is the key one that we have. We have almost $600,000 with that. We charge $1 per capita, and that's based on the census estimate. So as all our communities, for the most part, are growing every year, that new estimate comes out, so our revenue increases just a little bit from that. Last year, we put in some reserve funds for the Purple Heart Highway, anticipating that there'll be another technical assessment that will need to be done at some point, or now that we're starting to talk about alternatives analysis, maybe some funding for that. So we kept that in there. That's something we can discuss, but we just pulled that from reserve funds. So if it's needed, it's there. If we don't need it, we just don't access it. Also use reserve funds for the Safe Streets for All match. So MPO has most of the match in that. Iowa DOT contributed a little bit of match of that. And again, those dollars will change just a little bit as we get through the next several months and draw down some of those funds. And then new for this year, something we hadn't done in the past is we show interest income. Over the last couple of months, really over the last year, at the recommendation of the finance subcommittee, and then we talked to this group as well, we've moved a lot of our funding into the iPaid account, and that's a more high yield savings account that generates quite a bit of interest. So we put that in there because it is something that we will have coming to us. We try to be conservative with it. I think this year we're forecasting about $75,000, $80,000 of interest income. We only put $50,000 in there for next fiscal year, thinking that rates will probably decrease a little bit. We'll work with the finance subcommittee and make sure that number is realistic, but I did want to point that out. In terms of some changes from last fiscal year, you can see our federal funds increased by about $49,000. That is largely due to the fact that the 2020 census figures are now included in that formula. Previously, we were still going off the 2010 census figures. It's all a formula based on population. So that's a big part of that. I mentioned the increase in local assessments is due to the growth in the region, and then the $50,000 of interest income. The other thing you'll notice is that no contract revenue. So in past years, we've had revenue from SERPA, and the last few years from MIPA and other contracts like that. Based on direction from the board, we will not have any of those contracts continuing after this fiscal year. Dates on when those existing contracts will end is still a little bit to be determined, but we're targeting April 1st. And I say we, that's largely on the MIPA and SERPA side of things. They're driving, when we're not kicking them out, they're driving that, but that's the date they're targeting. And so far, sure, by July 1st, we won't have those contracts anymore. Going to the next page there, we've got expenses for the organization. Our expenses are fairly simple. You have staff costs, including salaries, wages for interns, and then fringe costs for those employees. And then we have some indirect and other direct costs. And on the table on the right, you can see those direct cost consultant and direct contest other broken out a little bit further. So in terms of consultants, we have the consultant for the Safe Streets for All program. We have the former staff, that's Zach's service to us. Purple Heart Highway, as I mentioned earlier, we have that in there in case it's needed. We also have some funds for strategic planning. We just kind of keep that in there in case it's necessary. And we're coming up due on updating our strategic plan anyway, so we wanted to keep that in there. And then we have a travel demand model consultant that's just sort of an on-call service to us. We have some other professional services such as attorney, accounting, payroll, audit, that sort of thing. And then on the bottom there, you can see some other projects and other special studies that we have. And this is one where I did want to get some feedback from you. We've had these costs are reflective of what we've had for the last several years. The Capital Crossroads one is one in particular that I wanted to highlight. We've had that approximate cost in there for the last, really since Capital Crossroads has been around. I know there's been some consternation in the past about that though, and I know they're kind of changing how they're doing their funding, so we don't know what the request is going to be, if there's going to be a request from us. I would assume there will be, but we do have some funding in there in case we want to keep funding that and contributing to that.
We have been doing that annually.
We have, yes. It kind of fluctuates on how much. Sometimes it's 10, sometimes it's 30, but around there is what we've been.
Okay.
So keep you updated on that. Changes from last year, you can see there, we have quite a bit of a decrease, largely because we are reducing from 10 staff to 9. That's largely due because of the loss of the SERPA contract. That was enough to fund one full-time employee. We're not kicking anybody out. We have a couple of vacancies right now. We'll have another vacancy here in the next couple of months once that transition takes place. So we just wouldn't fill one of the 3 positions that we will have available by the end of the year. Any questions on either of those? If you go to the next page, you can kind of see how all this stacks together. So you have our starting balance, what we're projecting at the end of this fiscal year, about 1.5, almost $1.6 million. And then you can see how the revenue versus the costs at the end of what we're projecting for just FY25 alone would be a positive balance of about $23,600. Then you add that to the balance we already have, it brings us to about $1.6 million. Obviously, these numbers will change slightly. The big thing that's hanging out there is the personnel costs. We'll know more about what those will be after the director position has been filled. And we know what that salary is going to be. We know kind of what the other trickle effects will be in terms of filling the other vacancies that we have. And there's also the salary survey out there that the search firm will be doing as well. So we'll have a better idea of what any staff salary increases will be or changes to that. So those numbers will change a little bit, but looks pretty solid right now. Any questions, comments on this? Happy to take them. Like I said, the finance subcommittee reviewed this on Monday. They didn't have any questions or concerns at the time, but obviously they will need more time to look at that, and we'll continue working with them as we go forward here.
Considering the overall reserve balance that we're gonna end up having at 1.6 there, do we have any guidelines in place that would set a parameter for, percentage of total budget, or, providing a guideline for how much reserve to take care of?
The only thing we really have is an operating reserve fund. So you can see there on the very bottom, it says local operating reserve of about $430,000. That's just enough to say we have 3 months of operating reserve that we will not touch. We will absolutely not touch. But beyond that, if we don't really have anything that says once we get to a certain point, we reduce assessments or we spend it down or anything like that. I know there's been talk in the past that once we get to a certain amount, we should we shouldn't carry that high of a balance. But I would say until we know a little bit more what our federal funds are going to be going forward and what the impact will be from the loss of some of these contracts, I wouldn't want to do too much with it. Because what we've seen in the past, our PL funds, our DOT funds did go up, which helped, but typically our costs exceed our revenues, at least our federal revenues. So we want to make sure we have some sort of reserve to absorb that down the line.
Yeah, just a suggestion, it might not be a bad idea to have finance committee or somebody look at creating some type of a guideline or threshold as far as what that looks like going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point, Doug. I thought we had Ted, is that never been discussed?
Not since I've been on the.
We don't have any fiscal performance goals.
I mean,
Probably just reserves, to
Yeah.
make sure you had enough reserves to do.
Yeah. no,
I
I
don't
know.
have a formal policy or anything that I'm aware of. I mean, I know we have had those conversations in the past, but I don't think anything's ever been fully fleshed out.
Yeah, and I think there are some things, like we have the couple studies I mentioned that if we need them, we can pull from reserves. There's a few other things that I know the tech committee's been discussing as far as software that we could purchase that the MPO could be the one that accesses that software, but then it's made available to everybody else. And they're not inexpensive. We're talking $80,000 to $100,000 per year for that. So not that would take a huge dent in that $1.6 million, but there's things like that we could do to help draw that down.
Yeah, and I think contingency funds are always, critically important to the total financial health of any organization. But making sure that we have some kind of a parameter that's based on, strategic line of thinking is probably important.
Thanks, Doug. Any other comments or questions? All right, so again, we will review this also at next week's policy meeting, right? That's
Well,
the-
not next, we'll touch on that, but no, not next week, because we're putting that agenda really light.
Okay, all right.
We'll send it out though in the post-meeting emails or whatever, so people will be able to review the document, understand it, and reach out for questions, but we won't present it next week, just because it's kind of a special meeting.
But we do need to have this, we will approve this
In March.
in March. Yeah,
As a draft.
okay. All right, thanks, Dylan. Item 9 is a report on the DC list, Gunnar.
Just at the time of year when we start preparing for the annual trek to Washington DC, and one of the MPO's roles in that is to put together our list of projects. We do this every year. And we've initiated that process with your representatives on the technical committee. We've asked anyone to provide them the list of projects from last year and asked them to provide updates or new projects, what have you. Basically, the list is going to be limited to projects seeking federal funding. And I want to say that's outside of STVGS. So if your community is going for an STVGS, but not anything else, then we might as well just leave it off and keep the list short for a delegation. But if it is going for multiple federal opportunities, then these have it submitted. I don't think there's any action required if you're here today. We're trying to work through your tech staff in order to have those submitted, but if there are projects you want to make sure are being submitted, you might just check with your staff to make sure that's being submitted. One caveat here is that the community project funding, the guidelines aren't out yet for that. And so your staff are having to kind of guess what projects they might be able to submit for those. We're anticipating that guidance in early March. And so there's gonna be a scenario where we're likely get headed to a scenario where we're gonna have a list that is the best guess based on the projects that we think are being submitted for our community project funding. And then our congressional offices will winnow those lists down. So by the time we get to DC, our list of 20 projects, let's say, might be a list of 15 based on the projects that made it through that funnel. But that's the way the timing all works out, and that's what we don't really have any control over. That's it for me, unless you have any questions.
Questions? Take together. Item 10 is the director's report.
Thank you. I've got a couple items for you here. One is just a quick update on our member updates, going around to all the communities and providing updates to the councils or boards of supervisors. That continues. I think we're in Waukee next week, so looking forward to that. Kind of shown this to you the last several meetings of just update on the 3 key recommendations after doing the listening tour earlier this year or last year. The strategic planning in the long-range plan. Now that the long-range plan is getting to the point where we're soliciting projects, we'll have a better sense of how that might fit together. So look forward to that here in the coming months of what we mean when we say a strategic long-range plan. The Transportation for America person who presented last month kind of gives some insight to that of being more strategic with our asks on discretionary dollars and understanding which projects fit best with which programs rather than just a scattershot approach. That's the kind of thing we're thinking there. The decision tree, we've already approved that back in November. We'll be using that as we go through the work program and identifying different projects, funding needs, that sort of thing. So look forward to seeing a little bit more of that here in the coming months as well. And then board assessment, talked about this a little bit. One thing we heard during the listening tour was just a chance to review how we structure things a little bit. Anticipate that will really start off once we get the new director and new officers take effect and that sort of thing. So kind of a wait and see on some of those. Want to provide some legislative updates. If you haven't seen House File 2145 is related to the Purple Arc Highway project. It would allow or really codify the minimum speed exemption that we've discussed this in the past, that part of that corridor is slow moving vehicles can use that. This bill would allow that to continue if it's designated as an interstate. It would basically put a grandfather clause in there. There's also ask for $250,000 from the general fund for an alternatives study. What we're asking today, we don't really have a legislative agenda, and this is kind of a new process for us. So what we'd like to do is get your approval to register in support of that bill. Since we've been talking about that project, it's something that I think we're all supportive of doing. There's a Commerce Committee hearing tomorrow morning that we'll also be at and speak to in support of this project. That bill was introduced by Representative Losi, who was here last month and spoke to that. So he did follow through and introduce that bill. Gunnar can address any questions you might have on the particulars of that. But that's one bill we wanted to bring to your attention. The other one is House File 591. This was for the Midwest Interstate Passenger Rail Compact. This would just promote, Iowa proposes that Iowa joins other Midwest states in the pursuit of high-speed passenger rail. This is something we've talked about in the past. I think we offered a letter of support to this a few months ago. So again, we'd ask to allow us to register in support of that bill as well. Moving forward, something I'd like to do is propose some sort of process for identifying which bills we support or maybe even oppose. Like I said, we don't really have a legislative agenda, but that would probably be the first step, is developing something so that if something meets that legislative agenda one way or another, we just know we can go ahead and get involved, at least as far as registering or speaking at hearings and so forth, without having to come back and ask permission every time or call a special meeting to do that. That's something that we've seen work on some other boards that I've been involved with anyway. If it doesn't meet that legislative agenda, there's always going to be stuff that's kind of out of the norm. Then we would get together and make sure that we're all in support of that before we do anything. So I don't know if there's any feedback or questions on those legislative items before we move on.
Any problems? And I mean, I would assume we're all in favor of support of House File 2145. So there's any comments, but that's obviously.
If it helps by registering support, I would, yeah.
Absolutely.
How long have you been working on this?
20 years.
Way before me.
20 years.
Yeah. I think it probably would be good.
That's exactly what we've been asking for, and Brian's been very helpful on
Yeah. I
getting
agree.
that to introduce.
What does joining the compact mean?
It would just be the state of Iowa would have to do this, and there's representation, so the governor would be able to appoint, I think, 2 or 3 people to represent. Bill that creates a mechanism to help fund that compact, to help them do studies and pursue this with a little more teeth than what it had been in the past. So it would allow Iowa access to some of that as well.
And the state would pay for that then, I would say, if there is cost?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any cost to it, but it would be the state. It wouldn't be anything for us. We're just in support of it, is what this would be. All right, I guess if we want to go into the next slide there. Give a couple committee updates. Obviously, there was a vote today on our officers, and that'll be before the policy committee next week as well. I do want to mention though that now that we've gone through the new cycle of selecting representatives, so the communities have gone through that cycle, we do have a handful of new representatives to the board. I just wanted to mention them. So Chris Coleman from Des Moines, who's no stranger to the MPO, but he'll be back on. Brian Baker is a representative for Norwalk now, replacing Stephanie Riva. Amanda Wonke's coming on with DART, and then we have Supervisor Van Ort now from the county. So I've been reaching out. We met with Supervisor Van Ort last week to do a quick orientation. We'll be meeting with the other new representatives as well if they want to bring them up to speed on things going on at the MPO. The technical committee elected their officers last week, so Luis Montoya from DART is now chair, and John Dostart from the city of Altoona is now vice chair. And then we have a couple new funding subcommittee representatives as well. Mike Jones from Windsor Heights will be one of them, and then Mark Snell from Warren County will round out the rest. They're in addition to the ones that have stayed on. Those two vacancies were brought about by Stephanie Riva coming off and then Ruth Randleman coming off as well. And then speaking of that, or I guess before we get to that, mention the March meeting. The March meeting was on an odd day just because of spring break. It was scheduled for March 7th. Because of the executive director decision next week, there'll be a need to probably have a special meeting to execute a contract with whoever's hired. So we're talking with the chair, what's been proposed is that we push back that meeting from its normal 11:30 time to about 3 o'clock, have the executive committee meet, and then follow it up with a special policy committee meeting. That way we just get it out of the way, and we don't have to worry about scheduling something over spring break timeframe. So hopefully that works for everybody. We'll get calendar invites out, and this will be on the board agenda for next week to approve it, but just want to give you a heads up on that. Okay, now I think my last slide. I just want to thank the outgoing officers, so Bob and Ted, for all your service. I know it's been an interesting year and an interesting couple of years. So really want to thank you for everything you've done. And just on that note too, next week will be an interesting meeting as well. I will not be there because, as you probably all know, I'm a candidate, so I'm just going to stay out of the policy meeting and not be there as a distraction or anything like that. So this will be the last time I see you before then. Just want to say thank you for your trust in me during this interim time, and I hopefully there's a positive decision coming out of that one way or another. I just want to thank you and thank you for your support this whole time. And hopefully I have your support next week as well, but I'll let you guys decide that. Yeah, I think that's what I have for you.
So, thank you, Dylan. And again, this is my last meeting as chair. I just, again, want to thank Dylan and staff for what they've done. Interesting is an understatement to say that during my term, but I think, you know, we've gone through a lot. I think we've come out of this and we're moving ahead on a positive track. And so I'm hoping we can move forward, and I thank Mayor Holm for taking over as chair. I know he'll do a great job during his tenure. And Ted, thank you for your service on the finance committee. Do you have any thoughts you want to provide?
No, I share your gratitude, and I appreciate Dylan and his staff and everything they've done. I'm just stepping away because Waukee and Windsor Heights wanted to have some more representation on exec, and I'm perfectly fine with that, so I'll still be on policy. So,
All right, thank you. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Gunnar, you had some things.
I have one housekeeping item and then another note that I'll share in other items here. The first is the chair's suggestion. We started working with our IT provider to develop distribution groups. Email addresses on the screen. If you were to use them, we'll get to the full policy committee. It's a new technology that we're playing with. It's not new technology, it's new to us. So I don't think there's going to be any issues, but if you are having any issues, please let me know and I'll make sure to address them. But just want to give you a heads up that in order to improve communications and help you all communicate directly with each other, we've set these up as tools for you to use.
I did use it yesterday for the executive director communication. I think it worked okay, except for you'll get a bounce back if it's not working for somebody, and I just forward that to Gunnar. I think. Yes. So I just used policy and DMA MPO yesterday for that one email. Hopefully you guys got it right. You got an email from me yesterday. Probably right now.
Yeah. Oh, we have a new spam folder that is the most bizarre thing. This one, the ones that get through, and then ones that you're going, where is it? So you have to just check your spam folder now to make sure I'm not missing good emails. It's
Well,
crazy.
if it becomes a problem, we'll find another solution. But
Yeah, no, we got.
this. The other thing I wanted to share is just the MPO's mourning of the loss of Bill Norley. He was many things to many people, but to the MPO, we got to know him through the process of Purple Heart Highway. He was one of the co-chairs of the kind of ad hoc egg stakeholder committee that had been working. He was just a kind soul, and I was really enjoying getting to know him. This is a loss for this effort. He was quietly advocating behind the scenes for this, and with a calm voice from some people who can be reactionary. So this is a loss, and I just want to acknowledge that loss and acknowledge Bill. So, yeah.
Yep, thank you, Gunnar. And I echo those. As soon as I heard about it, I reached out to Gunnar because Bill we said in several meetings, the bill either convened or at least was a quiet leader in those meetings. And again, I think he's advanced it, the Purple Heart Highway issue to where it is now and kept it going when people could have easily walked away. So certainly, and he was just a quiet, gentle leader, so, but very effective leader. So we mourn his loss. All right. Anything else for the good of the order then today? We stand adjourned.
Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's the year.